So it goes with race with people are buses.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death.
Saint Catherine, Zambia,
Pray for us.
Okay. So so we left off, covered the fourth and fifth wars of coalition yesterday. We saw some of the. After that, he's made the point. His head is swelling more because and success will sometimes do that to people. And so he's pushing more against the church. Divorces his infernal wife and gets himself a young woman who's part of the has lines to the Habsburg dynasty. So he's still got this image where he's going to take it over. Okay. So we're going to go on to the next thing here. And his next project, he decides his biggest issues are going to be with Britain and with Russia, and he decides to go after Russia first. So there you go. He invades Russia, and his timing is not good. He goes in in October. What's going to happen pretty soon in Russia? Now I think he must have thought they're just going to he's just going to show up and they're going to just capitulate and say, just give us an armistice, tell us what the terms are. The Russians, no, they're going to throw down. They're going to defend Mother Russia. And they end up doing it pretty much by retreating back through. He goes through Prussia. And he crosses over a river that's between Prussia and Lithuania, what's now Lithuania. So now he's in Russia, and he pretty much is just his first battle doesn't go well, but then he racks up some victories here. When he goes in there with basically. He goes in there with about 412,000 troops. Some of them are not. What he's also been starting to do is he's starting to draft people from not France, but draft people from maybe Holland, some Germans or whatever. So he's he's building up his army. So he goes in with about 400,000, and this is, you can see these sets of defeats. I mean, he goes. These are racking up some big numbers. When he actually goes, the Battle of Borodino is basically him getting ready to go into Moscow, and 80,000 people in one day. I mean, that's mind blowing. Anyway, so he loses those some, but then it gets uglier here. And I don't want to spend. You can really study the 1812 campaign, and it's kind of, and there's a lot of good stories in there. But this map kind of tells it. That orange line there, over here, this is when he goes in. This is where he crosses the river, and they made this map. The size of that band represents how many troops he's got. So he starts out with. It's like 1 millimeter equals 10,000 troops. Is kind of how this guy drew this. I thought it was an interesting graphic. And as he's working his way through, he's getting chip. He's losing people, but okay, we're unstable. Okay.
Yeah, that one is fine because we got a brand new machine here. So.
Okay. So he goes on. This is when he gets to Moscow. And then winter sets in. They burn Moscow to the ground, basically. They just level it. And then he's retreating. And look, these aren't so much battles. This is the winter killing him. And so he loses almost as many men from the winter than he lost in combat. when he gets there, he crosses over the Niemen River again. He's got basically, they get out of Russia, but by the time they get there, only 10,000 of them get back to France. Can you imagine that? You go off with an army with 412,000 men, only 10,000 of you get back.
Well, I think the French people will blame him so badly for doing that, right?
Oh, in fact, what happened is the army was blaming it. I mean, when they were just suffering. Now at this point, they've just thrown their rifles on the ground and they're just abandoning their cars. They're just like, get me out of here, get me out of here. And so the retreating army is in complete despair.
So in this case, the soldiers who lost their life maybe is kind of better because
Yeah, they're almost like the lucky ones.
yeah.
So they get back, and in fact, they're ignoring Napoleon's orders, telling him you need to do this or check that, and they just go, heck with this. If I can get out of here alive, we'll deal with it when we get back. So the discipline completely breaks down. So of the 420 plus thousand that invaded Russia, only 40 of them got out of Russia, and only 10,000 of them got back to France. That is just, those are bad numbers. By the way, just to put this in context, when you have, this is just military theory, when you have 20 or 30% casualties, your unit is considered combat ineffective. I mean, those are soft numbers because it depends on what kind of mission you're on and what's going on. But it's a rough rule of thumb. You lose 20 to 30% of your troops, your unit is combat ineffective. When you lose like 95% of your troops, I'd say that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
While he was going, rumors got back to France that he'd been killed in battle.
Since they lost so many soldiers, a bit probably maybe like 90%. Why don't the Russians just go and kill them? Like
they have the same problem with the winter.
So they can't go very far.
So they've had a real rough time. So they're very happy to hunker down and let the winter kill them. I mean, why? Because I kind of know this. If they have to travel that far, chances are we don't have to waste any bullets.
And probably the Russians has better equipment than the opponent.
Not in those days.
Oh.
What's interesting is that at the time of World War II, the largest air force in the country that had the largest air force was which country?
The U.S.
No, Russia. Which country had the most tanks?
Oh, Soviet Union.
Russia at that time.
Yeah,
that's pre-World War II, so the Soviet Union and most tanks. We were very ill prepared for World War II. We had to do an awful lot of getting ramped up, and it's really amazing in terms of how our factories came up and it did what it is. We basically won World War II because we outproduced the enemy more than outfought them.
Well, I think somebody said like they got, for some reason, the German guys got the American supplements for the enemy. I mean for the soldiers, and they opened the can like the food or fast food for the soldiers, and the date was like yesterday. So.
Oh well, and I can tell you as a soldier, when I was in Ranger School, I got some C rations, and the C rations were older than I was.
What?
Yeah, I was opening my little cans. Oh my goodness, the date on that. I wasn't born yet. I'm so hungry. I don't care. So, no, they'll last a long time, I hope.
They will?
Yeah, I can't. You know who invented canning food? Was the French. Pasteur, who invented the canning and they did it with bottles. And the idea was you heated things up until the fact that it's sterile, and then you sealed it. And that was like the first canning, Louis Pasteur. And that actually changed a little bit how people provisioned armies back then. So they had canned food, but it was in bottles in those days. Anyway, so we're digressing here. So he leaves Napoleon, when he finds out that this rumor has caused the people in Paris to go like, well, we got to set up a new government, whatever. So he leaves the retreating army and books it back to Paris to sort of get that back in order, and he does. But the main thing that comes from the result of this Russian invasion, he no longer appears invincible. I mean, he got wiped out. In fact, most of the Europeans who had to get some of their people drafted to go in there and die in Russia, they're very resentful, and if you've seen, as Napoleon was basically, his head was swelling, he was getting more despotic in the way he was ruling, and if they finally was pushing the people, they were like done. They were done with this guy, okay. Which then leads us into the War of the Sixth Coalition. There'll be 7 of them in total, the Sixth Coalition. So even as Napoleon is retreating from Moscow, the winter's killing him off. Tsar Alexander, I don't know how to spell, Tsar Alexander, he already is beginning to work to assemble the Sixth Coalition. He gets in touch with basically Great Britain, first of all, and then Sweden comes on board. Sweden is, you see even some of the smaller ones are like, we've had enough. And much of Germany, and these are the German states that have been like the Confederation, Bavaria and stuff. They're saying, okay, we're done with this too. Interestingly enough, Austria, who you thought would have been right in there, basically holds back. They've got a new sort of like, if you will, prime minister. There's a minister there named Metternich, and Metternich is a genius. He's brilliant. He can work the diplomatic circuit like no one has ever worked it before. And he's very cautious. And he's basically, okay, we've seen this, Napoleon has always managed to pull it out at the last second. Let's watch a little bit. Let's see how they're doing. So Metternich watches, and Napoleon has 5 victories in Germany, but they're expensive. He loses a lot of men. Metternich then arranges an armistice. Even though Napoleon has won, he's been told Napoleon actually knows he's bleeding out. So he arranges an armistice, but he starts to pressure Napoleon. He says, you need to agree to some of the protocols, some of my protocols, how I think we should set up Europe. You've got to agree to some of my protocols in exchange for Austrian neutrality. How does this work with How has it worked with Napoleon in the past when somebody tells him what to do?
Never.
Never. I mean, it's almost like he's got this. Somebody says you can't do that. That means I have to do it. Oh, you'll run into people like that.
Well, in this case, people should say that you have to do this, and then maybe he will be like, I never do this.
Yeah. So anyway, Napoleon refuses. At that point, Austria joins the Sixth Coalition and declares war on France. And the coalition, now with Austria involved, has grown to 800,000 soldiers. And Napoleon has 300,000 soldiers, which, by the way, not many of them are veterans. He lost all of his veterans going into Russia. So these are all noobs. I mean, they're well armed and everything, but I don't know how much training you need to basically just point a musket and fire a volley. But anyway, these other 800,000 soldiers would probably have more experience than Napoleon's 300. Although Napoleon probably is still the best general on the field. He's nuts. He's good at that one. You should stick to your niche. Okay. So this is the way it works out through. He starts out with this. These are the numbers again. He starts out with the War of Six Coalition. This is on the 1813 in May, and he goes basically through October. So he's kind of May, June, July, August, November, May, June, July, August, September. So less than 5 months. And he gets absolutely crushed in the Battle of Leipzig. This is the one where I think this is the one where the Tyroleans really got in there, and I think I got that right. Prussians came down, but it doesn't really matter. I'm not so much interested in knowing the tactics of these battles.
Yeah.
Just some of the bigger things going on here. So he gets clobbered. So now he's bleeding out again, as you can see. He starts with 300,000, and we've already worked through 2/3 of them. So I'm down to 100,000, 80,000 basically. So then there's a whole series of battles, and you notice that some of these names are starting to sound French. Guess what? Because they're attacking, they're pushing him into France. Okay, so it's kind of a managed retreat. He's very good. He can still he's winning, but it's kind of like I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember Muhammad Ali with rope-a-dope, and he would just curl up on bar and let the guy wear himself out trying to hit him with body punches and stuff. Let the guy get all tired, and then he would just unleash on him and knock him out. Muhammad Ali, he was a famous boxer. He's a famous boxer from back in when I was your age, and he was famous for his rope-a-dope because he'd let people tire themselves out, and then he would go in there and just
kind of
clobber them.
And what about what's the guy's name? Tyson?
Yeah, Tyson was just a young pup when
I know. Didn't he
when Muhammad Ali was there? Yeah, Tyson's.
Did he like bite other person's like ear off?
He did. Yeah, it was Mike Tyson's. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he
did.
He had some mental problems, I think. Anyway, so they're going in, and they finally fight through Reims, which is now we're getting closer to Paris. And finally, they're getting right outside of Paris. They're done. He has to surrender, and he figures, okay, so I'm going to surrender. What am I going to do? Do I flee? He actually decides. That he's going to flee to England. Maybe the English will give him safe passage. I don't know where that idea came from. That was like his arch enemy for freaking forever. Well, anyway, to combat that, he loses 363,000 in 10 months. So he's gone from basically 300,000 he starts with. He's bringing in more reserves. He probably only has 40,000 people left. Maybe even less, maybe 30,000 left.
That's crazy.
I mean, we haven't even finished his career yet because he's gonna try to have a comeback here.
Well, when did he die?
He died in 1826 or 28. So this is still, there's a few more little chapters here in his life. But while that's going on, the British and the Spanish forces defeat the French and drive them out of Spain and southern Portugal. So it's all falling apart. They're now in France from the north, and the Spanish and the British are now got him going up through the Pyrenees. So it's all done.
Yeah.
Naples' king and his old friend, he's a friend of Napoleon. This guy named Murat has been like with him since the first day when the whiff of grape shot thing. He was like there and part of that. So he was this buddy of his, and he made him the king of Naples, and he married Napoleon's sister. So this Joachim Murat, I use that as a pun, he rats on him, and he actually joins the Sixth Coalition and adds 60,000 troops. That's more troops than Napoleon has altogether. So now you've got like the coalition is sitting there with, again, about 800,000+ troops. Napoleon's down about 30,000, and he abdicates. He says, okay, we're done. So he abdicates, and they send him to Elba, which is a little island down in the Caribbean. Caribbean. Little island down. It's south of. I guess it's south of Corsica. I'd have to look it on a map.
Which country is that?
Yeah, it's Elba. It's a little tiny island. It's in here somewhere. It's just south of where France and Italy, down around here. This is Corsica. Corsica is the big one. I actually have a relative from there. But little Elba's a little tiny little dot there. You can't see it. It's not even big enough to put on the map. But that's where they basically sent him there, and the British are patrolling the waters because he's kind of like a prisoner on Elba.
Yeah, but didn't like the British treat him well, or just treat him like a prisoner?
Well, they just left him there on Elba to do his own thing, and so he's got from a big empire. He now has this little rock that he's on. I think they were just nervous. This whole thing about killing the people who are in charge, that doesn't sit well. The people who are in charge don't like that as setting that model.
Yeah.
So they just put him on Elba, just stay there.
But I've heard the stories that after they put him on the island, he was like reading on the writing. Did he like finally compose a really famous book?
No, that's later on when he gets on the St. Helena. But that's when he had nothing to do but write. What he did on Elba was he basically organized it. He made plans on how to go back and have a comeback in France.
Oh.
So he's basically working that problem.
But it never worked.
Well, he gives it a shot. So he returns with the help. I mean, actually, it was more than 100 days. It was about 5 months later. So I guess it's more like about. Oh, come on, behave. So I think it was more about it's about 4 months later. I'm going to have to fact check that. About 4 months later, he returns with the help, and then he just literally lands and he goes up there, and the people he lands with, he starts collecting the army is around there. You march with me. We're going to head to Paris.
Mm-hmm.
He gets up through Grenoble, and then there was actually some soldiers that might have stopped him, but then they decided, no, we'll join you. They go all the way, and they take Paris again. So he's back in charge. Meanwhile, Metternich is setting up his plans in Vienna. He's got this, they call it the Concert of Europe, and they're setting it up. They're setting it up in Vienna, how we're going to run things now that Napoleon's not here. Oh, rats, he came back. But they realize he's so badly undermanned and everything like that. They're not as terribly worried about it.
Yeah.
So they're continuing with their work in Vienna, try to get this thing going there.
Well, which country is Vienna in? Like Italy or no?
Pardon me?
So which country is Vienna?
Oh, Vienna is in Austria.
Oh.
And it used to be the capital, if you will, of the Holy Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really neat city to visit, by the way. That's where Mozart was, and they have the architecture is terrific. It's a really wonderful little
Place.
wonderful place to see.
Did they say like it's kind of like an honor for a singer to have a concert in that city?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean that's where Mozart, because Mozart was there, and so
Yeah.
it was kind of like the cultural center of Europe at that point. I mean it was much more so than, let's say, London or Paris at that time. And I mean later on places like Berlin became bigger, and London became bigger, Paris. But anyway, so he comes back. Now this is while he was there, while he was at Elba. This is what was going on. Metternich, he had his plans for this concert of Europe was we're going to restore the boundaries before the French Revolution. He was very much against liberalism, and he could see all the misery that's coming out of these quote liberal reforms that always end up with somebody who's a despot who ends up drafting everybody and going off and starting war. I mean, and you could see that from all the way through the French Revolution. So he says, we're going to take it back. And he says, in doing that, it's going to restore the church, because we're going to get back to monarchs who are sympathetic, more sympathetic with the church. We're going to settle disputes without war. We're going to have this, and he sets up this, it's a quadruple, what do they call it? Is it four? Yeah, I've got it written down here somewhere. Four of them get together. Oh yeah, the Congress, Austria, Prussia become the great, and they dominate Austria, Russia, Prussia, and Great Britain, the four of them. And it's the Quadruple Alliance, that's what it's called, the Quadruple Alliance, my bad. And so they set up the four big ones get there, because there's all a bunch of ankle biters. There's like 38 little German states, and there's about another like 20 other other little smaller states. But the four big ones are going to kind of be running it, and the rest of you kind of like, and they actually divided up the votes in the Congress apportionately on how big you were. So if Austria has more people, they would get like 17 votes, and if you're one of the Württemberg, Germany, you might get 2. So, but I can kind of get that proportionate. That makes sense in some sense. We do the same thing here in our United States. Our library, our electoral system is what determines how many congressmen you have in your state is proportional. And every 10 years they do another census. And depending on what it is, they'll say, okay, New York, you're losing a seat. Texas, you're gaining a seat. It's that sort of thing. So they meet and they're meeting and they're talking about this. Meanwhile, at Elba, he's planning his return to France, and he evades the British. He lands in February 1815, and then for 100 days he's in Paris, and he's reconstituting his government, and he's raising an army of 200,000 men, which is actually kind of impressive. The Congress declares that Napoleon is an outlaw, and they form the Seventh Coalition, which now involves Vienna, Austria, Russia, Prussia, Great Britain, and all the Anglo-Britons. So now he's got 200,000 men, and he's up against all of Europe. Not just the 800,000 that he dealt with before, but he's dealing with he's got a bigger problem. So what does Napoleon always do when somebody declares war? Does he wait for them to come to him?
No, he will attack.
Yeah. His idea of a strong defense is a good offense.
Which is true.
Yeah, actually, that's not true.
Huh?
The defense. I'll tell you, this is an old soldier. The defense favors, in terms of what it's going to take to defend, 3-1. So when I was over in Germany, and we were facing the East Germans and the Soviet Union, we knew that with our 1/3, we could keep, if we have 1/3, we can keep them away. We have 1/3 of their way. Why? Because it's defensive. We're behind dirt, trees, and stuff, and they're out in the open. That's in those days, because everybody just marched out in the field and shot at each other. There was less of that. But even then, usually tactically, the defender had an advantage. Where Napoleon ran into that, or when the French ran into that, when they were in Spain, and they were trying to take over Spain, and they're trying to take Saragossa, which they're defending themselves. They killed so many more French than the Saragossans lost, and then eventually they just took artillery and they just crushed the city, and they're going to have to leave. But when you get people that'll haul up and they'll actually defend, it's like Thermopylae. The Spartans are defending Thermopylae. They had 280 guys, something like that, and they defeat them. They defeat the Persians.
Yeah.
Persians had like about 20,000.
That's like
Defenses. There's something to be said for being on the defense. But Napoleon didn't think that way. He said, "I'm taking it to them." So he attacks. He has this battle of Ligny, and there's actually were 3 battles that happened at the same time. When this one gets the title, he loses 33,000, but he manages to push them all back, and they get reorganized. They have him so badly outnumbered, and of 33,000, now he's down from 200,000 down to basically down to about 160 maybe, and then we have Waterloo. There are plenty of movies. If you want to know what's going on Waterloo, you can probably Google, see a good movie, and get a better picture of that. But in 2 days, he loses 86,450 men, which is 43% of his army. And again, 20 to 30% your combat ineffective. So he's done. also, I just had this little note, it just cracked me up. Marat, who had gone over with his 60,000 people to join the coalition, the Sixth Coalition, and is now theoretically part of the Seventh Coalition because he's dealing with the Congress in Vienna. He re-rats and goes back to being supporting Napoleon when he thinks, I guess, right after the Battle of Ligny, when Napoleon's winning, he re-rats and he joins him. At which point, the Austrians grab his tail and send him to France, who was very unhappy the fact that he ratted the first time, and they execute him. And I love this little quote. It's from Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill got criticized for it. He at one point was the Conservative Party, and then he ratted and went to the Labour Party, and then he re-ratted and went back to the Conservative Party, the Tories. And then when asked about it, he said, anyone can rat, but it takes a certain amount of ingenuity to re-rat. So that was Winston Churchill. I think Marat was just being stupid. I mean, it's like, in this case, Winston Churchill, I have a lot of, I think he was the real deal. Okay. And this is the Battle of Ligny and Waterloo. So on the 16th, Ligny, Quatre Bras, and Waterloo. This is all in Belgium. And, I'll just leave this on the slide if you want to look at it. But after that, Napoleon's basically, he sails to England. He figures I got a better chance of holding onto my head in England. And he shows up, I forget which port he shows up, and they're kind of like, what do we do with this guy? So they stick him on a transport and they send him to a little tiny island in St. Helena, which is down off the coast of Africa. And I mean, that place is just like a little desert island. I mean, you have to carry water for a mile to get it up to where he was in prison.
So is there like somebody do it for him, or he has to do it by himself?
He went with about 26 of his close colleagues.
Yeah.
They would not let his family go with it. So his wife, who was sent back to Vienna, who takes an oath never to speak to him again, and his son Napoleon I, he's back there in Austria.
Well, how old was he?
I don't know. It's like 2-3 years old.
No, I mean Napoleon.
Napoleon?
Yeah.
I'd have to look that up, but this is around 1815. My guess is when he started out with the French Revolution, if I recall, he was 28, and that was in about 1796. He's about 28. 4 years, 32.
Yeah.
Add 15. So he's 247. He's about 47 years old. He's about there.
That's so young.
Yeah. Well, and then he was rather disappointed at Waterloo that he didn't take a bullet, because he at this point he knew he was completely done. There was not going to be a third chance to come back. And so he ends up going to this, and he basically imprisoned at St. Helena, and he can't write to anybody, talk. So this is one, because he will have no contact with the outside world. He is like in isolation in that sense.
Yeah.
That's when he wrote his big books. He wrote all of his memoirs, Napoleonic memoirs.
Yeah.
That's when you get these tomes. He was a very busy guy. Very busy guy. Okay, so, tell you what, this is probably a good place to break. We're going to talk about what was going on in the Congress of Vienna, because they were meeting during his return and during the war, and what they were setting up. And then what we're also going to do tomorrow, I'm going to walk you through George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, who you won't even find him in the index in this book. Blew my mind. And this guy probably had more, in terms of political thought, he had more influence on what went on in the 19th and 20th century than any other political thinker out there. So we want to talk about, we're going to go ahead and I'll give you the sort of like the rundown, the cliff notes on Friedrich Hegel. if you wanna just get a little head start, you can just Google him
Mhm.
and just read what Wikipedia has to say about Friedrich Hegel, okay?
Is Wikipedia like true or sometimes Wikipedia can be wrong, right?
Right, I think usually when you're dealing with genuine history where it's all coming out of his books. I mean, he wrote the book on phenomenology, he wrote all this. I mean, he's been around. I think I'm more worried about Wikipedia when they're talking about more real contemporary things like the insurrection on January 6th, that kind of thing. That one's getting a little sketchy. I think if you go back this far, I think you're probably safe. Well, or you can Google and read something else about it.
Yeah.
I'm not a Wikipedia fan.
Maybe.
They just pop up. They're usually there. Okay?
Yeah.
You guys have enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you tomorrow.